Today I'm going to tell you how to avoid traps and rip-offs on eBay when you're buying ham radio stuff. Make no mistake though, now is a much better time to buy than say 30 years ago. You get much more for less these days. Just look at these prices. 30 years ago they were about the same as now, and the equipment back then had fewer features, fewer modes and fewer bands. Still, you do need to be cautious when you're looking at eBay to make sure that you don't get sucked in. Take these nonsense claims. Handheld transceivers claiming up to 20 watts output. That can't be right, and they've got to be false claims. Just say no. When you put these units onto an RF power meter, the output power is likely to be much less. And even if they were 20 watts, then just imagine the EMR exposure you'd get, the short battery life, and the results won't be all that much better than with 5 watts anyway. If you want more power, or at least a better signal, then you'd be better off just to stand on a chair to get some extra height, and get further range. You should also avoid sharks. Have a look at this advert. A transceiver claiming 450 watts RF power output. It looks like it's going after the CB free band crowd, although the frequency display is in an amateur band, 28.555 MHz. And the price, that's massive as well. Nah, definitely a rip-off, give that a miss, even if you just want a single band transceiver on 10 meters and you're a licensed amateur. Instead, you'd be better off to buy new, for a lower price, something like an Icom 718. That puts out a genuine 100 watts output, is multi-band, and you can get it at a cheaper price from a reputable dealer. Now I should mention all these prices are in Australian dollars, but the principle applies no matter what country you're in. eBay prices can be inflated. Don't fall for the bait. Another thing on eBay, you sometimes see old equipment that is pretty much unusable these days. For example, here's an Icom IC2A. A bit like a brick, it is much heavier and bigger than modern 2-meter handheld transceivers. They performed well and were good quality products in their time. However, try and use one on a repeater these days. The first thing you'll note, it doesn't have any CT/CSS subtone. That's important for accessing many repeaters. And there's no DTMF keypad, meaning you can't use features like IRLP. Also, these transceivers don't have 70 centimeters, whereas it's more common for handhelds now to have 2 bands. If you look at the price, the $180 was a few months ago, then I saw the same rig on for $165. They've dropped the price slightly, but it's still too much, and no sucker has yet bought it. Have a look at what new dealers are offering. Similar transceivers like the Yaesu FT270 are for $209. Not much more than what you saw that ad for with the old Icom before. It's nearly 40 years newer and has all the modern features that you need these days. And for a little bit more, you can buy a 2-meter and 70 centimeter FM handheld. Again, with all today's features and with a warranty, so that if something goes wrong, you're not on your own. There's even cheaper options. Transceivers like the Belding UV82 you can get for well under $100. Maybe not quite as good on the RF side as the Yaesus and Icoms, but still quite good value for someone starting off. Some of my other videos have featured what you can achieve with a Belding type handheld transceiver. Now this one looks pretty cheap. It's an old Icom 22S from the late 1970s. It was a classic at its time and very popular. But it lacks all frequency coverage. You have to mess around with diode matrices and connections to get different frequencies. You're restricted to pretty much 22 preset channels. There's no CT CSS subtone that repeaters often need. No DTMF microphone, and again, no warranty. The other thing is note how it's labelled vintage. Think twice about buying something that's labelled that. You're much better off by buying more modern equipment. And yep, sometimes it's a good idea to pay a bit more. Here's an example of two QRP transceiver kits. The one on the left, based on the famous Pixie, it's only $16 US, very low price, but it's only a single frequency, it's a bad receiver, it will be difficult to select stations that might be calling you, and it's too low power, so the chance of people coming back to you is quite low. On the right, in the meantime, is a more expensive rig, the QCX Plus transceiver from QRP Labs, which is $55 but gives you full coverage in your chosen amateur band, a much better receiver and more power. You're much more likely to get contacts on that. Definitely worth the extra difference in price. Here's another example. On the left, this looks like a late 1970s all-mode 2-meter transceiver. It was good at the time, $708. But there can be issues if it goes wrong, there's no warranty, and it's only single band. Whereas on the right, you pay a bit more, but you get 12 bands, not just one band, and you've got a warranty. There's no doubt that the Icom is the better value for money unit. Also avoid vintage obsessions. They're sometimes overpriced. Make no mistake, the TS830S you see here was a great rig in 1980, and a lot of people swear by the receivers in particular on them. But look at the price, $1,700. You can buy a current model Icom 7300 for less. That has more bands, it's got a great display, including a band scope, and you've got some good filtering options. Plus, it's more stable in frequency that you'd need for today's digital modes. Here's another comparison. On the left is a FT270, a fairly similar age to the TS830, but a middle level of transceiver. It was very popular in its day. The seller wanted $800, which is too much. And it's also a valve type rig. You've got tune and load controls. There's a bit of an art in tuning these transceivers up and getting them in use. So it's probably more suitable for experienced people who are willing to do that. Meanwhile, on the right is a current model, an Icom 718, for a similar price. It's got more bands, including new bands that we didn't have in 1980, and is all round a much better option. Then there's what you might call vanity matching accessories. They burn a hole in your pocket, but they don't make your signal any better, or allow you to hear stations any better. And they're the two things you really need from an amateur station. To be able to be heard long distances away with a clear signal, and be able to hear other people. That microphone there you see, $200 second hand, is a little bit high. You should be able to do better by experimenting with some cheap electric microphones, maybe a couple of dollars, making something up with some salvage bits and pieces, and you'll have audio every bit as good as a proprietary microphone, provided you've got things like levels and impedance matching done correctly. Even something salvaged from an old telephone might be okay. Another vanity type item, matching speakers. Again, people pay fortunes, or at least if you look at the eBay ads, you see people asking fortunes for a matching speaker for your transceiver. But electrically, they're all about the same. A basic 8 ohm speaker. You're better off to find an old stereo speaker off the street or from a charity shop for a few dollars. Remember, if it doesn't contribute to your station's ability to hear and transmit, then it's a waste of money. Somewhere else that you can save money is by building antennas. The ad I saw here, $150 for a second-hand antenna. It's funny, is it second-hand? It says pre-owned, but then above it says brand new and unused. So a bit perplexing there. But anyway, if you wanted to have a good antenna, you're better off to make your own, particularly with something simple like a dual band dipole, and put the money that you save into making your antenna, say 5 meters higher. You'll get much better results. Similarly, antenna couplers. That's something that if you're practically inclined, you can save money on. An antenna coupler, even though it's a nice fancy box, is just 2 big variable capacitors and a switched inductor. Even an ugly one can electrically be okay and give you the results you need. Just make sure that you look at the variable capacitors to make sure they're good quality, and also the switches, as some switches in cheaper ones are shoddy and may not handle the power that you want to use with it. Something else you sometimes see advertised on eBay are old radio magazines. Even though they sometimes have high prices asked for them, in the real world, outside of eBay, they're often pretty much being given away. So it's fun reading old magazines. You get a good idea as to the history and equipment that was available 20, 30 or more years ago. But if you're patient, just wait for a bit and have a look at various Facebook groups, and you might see magazines being given away very cheaply or for nothing at all. Some people, even if they're moving house, might just be giving away the magazines and saying if someone doesn't pick them up, then they go into the recycling bin, which you don't really want. You want to preserve a bit of radio history, so grab some free magazines when the offer is available. So that's a quick sum up of what you can see on eBay, how to avoid some of the traps and being ripped off. Most sellers are reputable. There's a lot of good equipment on eBay, and now is a good time to be buying amateur radio stuff. The prices are much cheaper, especially for new gear, now than they used to be. Still, just take some precautions and don't pay too much. Here's something else you might be interested in. I've written 7 books on various aspects of amateur radio. For more information on them, visit my website VK3YE.com or search the title on Amazon. In Australia, if you're starting out, a good choice is the Australian Ham Radio Handbook. It talks about all the things you need to succeed in amateur radio as a foundation licensed amateur operator. Internationally, some of my other books may be of greater appeal. 99 Things You Can Do with Amateur Radio talks about the diversity of our hobby and things you can do. Some you don't even need an amateur radio license to do. Or for those returning back into amateur radio, and there's quite a few during these COVID times, then Getting Back into Amateur Radio is a book you might want to consider. If you're into low power amateur radio, then I've got 3 books that are of interest, minimum QRP and a couple of antenna books. So have a look at the reviews, have a look on Amazon, and you might be interested in these books, either available as an ebook or in paperback.